All right, you guys, we are back.
We're back! What's up?
This is Courtney from Willow's Bloom.
This is Ricardo Zivar from The Infinite Soul.
And today we're going to be talking about some important angles of the chart, the Ascendant and Descendant.
Mm-hmm. Just basically the forms where, basically the Ascendant being, and I like to call it our soul, or our soul's journey, and the Descendant to wrap around our relationship, our divine relationships, contracts, and the Libra house, and kind of discuss and unfold whatever that kind of entails. And honestly, it's really well advised to understand not only this placement for your own self-awareness, but also what kind of partners you're looking at. What? Pulling that and get the mic in the right zone. Okay. Am I too loud or what's up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just, had a great day. Astrology's great. But yeah, definitely I think the Descendant is something, it doesn't get talked a lot about. We don't unpack the Descendant enough, I feel sometimes. But, looking at the Descendant and even just the Descendant ruler gives a lot of context onto kind of like either our divine partners, marital partners, or kind of like what we kind of need to be really understood as an individual as a whole. So, yeah.
In this episode, I think we'll just kind of talk about what these angles mean, and then maybe in another one we'll actually go through and kind of talk about what they mean in each of the signs.
Yeah, I could say that. I mean, what do you feel, Courtney, just to touch on like the Ascendant first, or
yeah, let's jump into the Ascendant.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
This one is really important in my work. I mean, I'm sure it's important in everyone's work, but especially career astrology, I am always looking at the Ascendant and the planet that rules the Ascendant to understand like how someone behaves in a certain situation. And obviously your sun has a lot to do with that as well, and your identity. But at the end of the day, I find that people take initiative or take action according to their Ascendant ruler in a lot of ways. And I know everyone talks about the Ascendant is like totally how people see you and the face that you present to the world.
Right.
And I do think that there's something to that. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that. And I think the Ascendant is something that still to this day kind of confuses me in the sense that it's really hard to classify what is the sun and what is the Ascendant and how are they totally different.
Right. I really want to touch on that huge, because the way I interpret the Ascendant actually is right at the moment you were born, where the sun was rising in the east. And that almost to my sense is now where the soul is getting like almost the turning of the page, the chapter has begun in the realm of someone's life, where you can literally see where was the sunrise happening, and that is your Ascendant basically. But I like to interpret, and some people got this misconfused because we could say the sun is your soul. And I'm not taking that away from people. Good at all. The sun is your soul. I'm just kidding. But like, to just touch on that is like, there is definitely part of your autonomous ego that the sun is, because it's like your core nucleus of one's essence in a way. But the Ascendant, in my eyes, is actually your soul's project, your soul's desire to expand. And not to be too crude, but like I've heard the Ascendant be termed so many things that an astrologer I've heard has termed it almost like the whore of experience. No, I just went there. But like what I'm saying is that the Ascendant, whatever sign it might be in, wants to experience everything in the realm of what that Ascendant is. If it's Taurus Ascendant, they want to experience everything that kind of would encapsulate Taurus's realm and present that even as their own personality in the world, because it's almost attributed, I want to take place in this field. But if, we're getting into the Descendant, we'll be looking at to the opposite side of like how we're meeting the world in my eyes, and like how we're kind of like actually connecting in a relationship to the other side.
Okay, let's not go there quite
yet.
Get
it
again. Yeah. But yeah, one of my teachers, Achyuta Baba, who's amazing.
Say the name again.
Achyuta Baba.
Ooh.
So learn how to spell that. It's a mouthful. But yeah, he's a Hellenistic astrologer, so like traditional astrology, and he described the Ascendant and the Ascendant ruler. So just really quickly going over the Ascendant rulers, like Mars would rule Aries and Scorpio because in traditional astrology, they don't use the outer planets. Then the sun would rule Leo, the moon would rule Cancer, Mercury would rule Virgo and Gemini. Um, Jupiter would rule Sagittarius and Pisces. Saturn, I'm going complete out of order.
It's all good.
Venus would rule Libra and Taurus. Saturn would rule Aquarius and Capricorn. Did I get them all? I think that was it.
Right.
So basically,
you can keep going.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to find the planet that rules the rising sign, and you're going to find where it is in your chart. So like the house and the sign that's in, and it's going to add so much to your personality, because like besides your sun, besides your moon, that is the most important planet. That's the one that I see has some of the biggest impact on people's career choices, like I mentioned. The way that people perceive their personality. I think I come across as really nurturing, even though I'm super Gemini, and that's because my Mercury's in Cancer. And I definitely, I'm sure you can feel that vibe sometimes.
Definitely with communication, you love to be present and love to be there and hear everyone, and there is that nurturing when it comes to the art of communication.
Right.
Really, I want to be there to listen and hear all of
Right.
it. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so it can show a lot about how, not just what kind of career you're attracted to, but the style of the way you approach your career. So like, I want to not just be super Mercury. I want to be this Cancer energy in my career. So I want to talk about emotions. I want to get into the depths of things. And anyway, my teacher Chitta said that the ascendant ruler is like the person at the helm of the ship, driving the ship. And so I think that's if you imagine the chart as a ship, it's like that's the planet that's in charge of
basically everything. So it's definitely the captain of the show in that way.
Yes.
I fully agree with that, and I like to look at that the most. You know, if that's something you agree on and I can agree on, I look at that as one of the biggest aspects of a human's chart. When you get to see it, what is the ascendant ruler's planet? Where is it sitting, and how does it activate with people? So to drop into the ascendant rulers, I totally agree. Honestly, I think it's one of the, I love that analogy though, like the helm of the ship or like the captain of the boat or however you want to look at it. But it's like you're looking at your ascendant, and whatever sign that is, look at that ruler and see where they're at in the chart, because they're being a huge aspect totem pole to how the whole chart is expressing myself, you know? I'm a Leo rising, so I look at where my sun placement is, and I have it in the 5th house. So like, I've recognized like I love being with creativity and I like all the kind of creative elements of expression. I mean, I love to but I don't really take it as like a Leo energy. I kind of like that I feel more Sagittarian about it. Like I want to be more in the love of experience. So sometimes I like get so much satisfaction off communicating in music. Like that's one of my highest excitements is playing music and almost making it like a language. Like if it was from drums to singing or something, that a cappella kind of vibe, there's something in there that has this little essence of Sagittarian wisdom, I feel, and you get to experience the unfolding of that. And like I find like in my truest sense, like that's kind of my inner child energy. And like if I look at that, I can really feel like, yeah, that feels authentic to who I am in a way. And so like, yeah. But yeah, we can drive into all that, but for the ascendant, for sure, that's one of the biggest aspects I feel like we can really look at in a way.
So there's just so much that has come up around the ascendant that people have said. And a lot, that's why I say I'm confused, because a lot of it I'm still through my chart readings trying to decide what I believe about it. Because I think it's probably one of the most misunderstood parts of the chart, to be honest, or like vague, I should say.
I just feel like people aren't giving it attention that aren't really in the practice. They don't really. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we had to kind of open this is almost like the ascendant. It's how you're presenting to the world, and it's like this archetype. But like, I think I would give it more of your soul. I give it the soul's project. I like
the soul's project
because you're learning how. Let's get into
like
deep
your purpose.
Can I go into deep scripture on this? Like an ancient scripture would say that your ascendant is your gift of what you did not receive in the last lifetimes.
That's interesting.
And so that's a perception that I kind of feel is like, is if your last lifetimes, this was a deficiency of something I never got to experience, the Ascendant is your gift to try to understand this composition in life. If I'm a Leo rising, you could say that I never got authoritarian, I never got attention, or I was someone that was pushed aside, or there was something where I wasn't being able to be spoken and be heard kind of vibe, for an example.
So let me push back on that.
Push back on it, yep.
Because I like that. I'm like starting to think about, because I never thought about it like that. What if your South Node is conjunct your Ascendant? So the South Node representing who you were in a past life.
Then you didn't use it, maybe. That's a perception. It's kind of like a rare
unfulfilled.
Like an unfulfilled Ascendant journey. And it's there, it's rising, but it's almost like you coming back to do it again.
This time for real.
But then there's got to be something, because the North Node is directly going to be right by your Descendant, which is a good segue to talk about that.
Wait, not yet.
Not yet. I got it. But
the reason I brought all this up about the Ascendant being vague is because I've heard people talk about how the Ascendant is something that you grow into. So like, you know, like it's something that you have to kind of like learn to become in a way. Like you're not just popping out like, I'm a Virgo rising. I'm not just popping out like a super Virgo rising, but I have to learn over time like how to embody that.
Right.
And I was just kind of curious what you think about that.
I fully agree. Like I said, being a soul's project, I think it matures over time. And in many ways, like, you know, some people it's definitely innate. Like, let's be honest, there is some characteristic traits. There might be style, clothing choices. I definitely see the Ascendant is kind of like in high school. Some part of you could be really noticeable. But like, I can even speak just for myself that my own rising, I'm actually was very, very shy and very like docile and just kind of like very honorable, but I wasn't like trying to be a big show off. Now, when you go to 5 years old, my mom would probably be like, come on, man. Like, you know, like, and I'm using that as an example. I'm using myself as an example as a Leo rising, but like that took time for me to like evolve into, to own that part of me, which I feel a lot of Leo risings don't get enough credit for. Like, I know even Marilyn Monroe and like, I mean, the list goes on actually of people, but like, you know, starting to own their creativity or letting themselves actually express themselves. You know, some Pisces risings, you know, is like allowing them to actually own their kind of enchanting, magical kind of ways, if you will, and like allow themselves to really open up to like the fantasy around them, you know, and like sometimes they can get too lost, and it's like learning how to navigate the ship in that way. So as if the soul's project, yeah, I don't think it's a gift, but it's like something you got to learn to keep crafting in a way. And I think that makes it more of a expansive journey. Like everything is moving because of the sunrise of your Ascendant. So.
Yeah. So maybe it's kind of like, you know, an unopened gift. Like it's something that you have, it's innate within you. It is you, but yeah, you have to do the journey of unwrapping it and exploring it and getting to use it and getting to know it and like fully embodying whatever that is. So I love that. And I think just you already touched on this briefly, but I wanted to say it more explicitly.
Dogs around cameras, it's going to be all right.
My dog is blind and my tripod is set up and I'm just waiting for her to knock it over.
Today's the half moon of Pisces and the Gemini moon, and it is a Looney Tune vibe.
It feels so erratic.
It's all over the place. It's all a little crazy. You got to enjoy this kind of ride because it's going to be like a cuckoo carnival. What am I calling it? The Burning Man of energy of the day.
Yeah, he did say that.
And so yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to be a little weird. It's all good.
So you already mentioned this, but the aesthetic, like someone's appearance, I for sure feel like I have in the mix of like Virgo, Gemini kind of physical appearance.
The pixie vibe.
I don't know. I feel like at least my top half of my frame is like petite. My bottom half isn't, but I feel like, yeah, it's just interesting. You can kind of see like how much that comes into play. Like you're a Leo rising and you have this like long mane, and so is my boyfriend, and he's got this like beautiful head of hair.
There's a lot of male Leo risings that usually have something about the hair.
Yeah.
Something about the hair. Yeah.
And
I don't know. It's just a thing. Like,
it's so obvious. When I see someone with like Leo in their chart, I'm like, it's so obvious by their hair. Or like Aquarius risings, they have this like piercing light eyes oftentimes, or this pale skin, like
Regardless
they
of
look
ethnicity.
extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's not always going to be so cut and dry, but so the ascendant has lots
I
to do
like
with
to share,
physical.
even females with Aries rising, they're not like brute, but they like, you know, you could see like, oh, their shoulders, like they could throw a punch, you know, like like or something like that, you know. And there's an attribute of like, even let's say Aries rising, let's use that for an example, is like owning that you're powerful and owning that like you can be a leader and that you can own the essence of, you know, I joke like being number one, or like, you know, being able to what's the term I'm trying to use, like, you know, step up to the challenge kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And that might not be the most understood innate thing within that rising. That's what I've experienced as well. So it's like our rising's this gift that we're almost like trying to recognize about ourselves in a way of how, and I will be honest, most people, you don't really even have that much conscientiousness of how powerful it is. Like I know in Aquarius rising that she's from the other side of the world, learned 3 languages and done all this stuff. Now she's not in the reality thinking, oh, that's whatever. But when I see Aquarius rising, like you're bringing culture to the door. You are one of the more eclectic and like culturally diverse people in this group. Like, and that's something to look at, you know, that's something to wake up to a little bit.
Yeah. And the Descendant, I mean, I have been doing a lot of, you know, research diving into this recently. Planets in the 7th house, the sign on the Descendant. Who do we attract? What does it mean? And I will say that some of the most interesting stuff that I've learned or have been thinking about is the ways in which we disown, repress, or don't see how we embody a certain sign. So, for example, as a Virgo rising Pisces, I might attract a lot of Pisces into my life, or people who have that kind of mystical, creative, go with the flow type of energy. Virgo is usually much more in control.
There's a little stress, like stressful, like getting it done kind of vibe.
Are you calling me stressed out, Ricky?
No, I'm not.
Because you would be right.
But Virgo's like, we're moving, you know, we're doing stuff.
I feel like this is so fucked up, but I heard a tarot reader. I love her. I think her name is like Iso Tarot. And she was like, you know, your energy is kind of like a clenched butthole.
What in the God's name?
And that's like that's like unfortunately, the visual that comes to my mind sometimes.
Dear
I think
Lord.
of Virgo is like a fucking clenched butthole.
Oh man, we gotta redeem the Virgos a little here. Come on.
No, I love I mean, I am. That's why I feel like I
And
can
you, of
say
course,
it.
yeah.
But it's all out of, you know, good fun. I do notice this level of like holding it all together. And that's the kind of feeling of like that tenseness that I will I will take care of this, like taking on the responsibility. And that brings about that kind of level of tension. And Pisces is so the opposite. And I mean, it depends, of course, on the chart, but
Right.
you know, just like these people, I attract a lot of these like very creative flow types that, you know, don't have a schedule, and like, I don't know, they just like,
It all kind of works out in a way
like,
that you're
I don't use recipes, or I don't like follow the rules. I just blah, 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 blah. And they just kind of like, everything just works out for them. And it's almost like triggering to somebody with a Virgo ascendant. Of course, again, it's going to depend on the rest of your chart.
You get the antithesis of both things though, too, because too much Pisces energy can also be very chaotic too. Like,
right.
It can also be the realms of chaos where Virgo comes in and brings divisive order. And God, that's why I really look at Virgo is like a sign that God bless you all that being here, because like I don't know what the world would do without y'all. And I've had
needs Virgos.
More Virgos that have entered my life are like saints. So I just want to say that I want to change that up a little bit, because my interpretation of Virgo, I always think of the bumblebee. I think of the bumblebee because the bumblebee has a passion to keep making honey, and by biological program is in it. I'm gonna go to this flower, pick up this information, we go over to this flower, do that information, We got Luna up to no good. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. But yeah, and then they bring something that's like ultra sweet, and so the like the honeybee is always kind of communing, and I see that mercurial process within the honeybee between Virgo and Gemini. There might be different areas of how this
Right.
interplays, but I always see Mercury as that kind of bumblebee on the go, busy kind of vibe.
Okay, well, thank you for redeeming me, but really, I want to keep it on track with like why I'm bringing that up. It's just because the descendant is this part of you that is a projection, or that is something that you don't, like I said, like you don't fully own it. And so yeah, I find that I mean, you can even see this in. I was looking up kind of what creates attraction. There is attraction through having having someone meet our needs, having someone who completes the puzzle. So that would represent kind of what's happening in the astrology. I'm attracting a Pisces because they have something I'm missing. And then the other is the likeness factor, the familiarity factor of like, they're kind of like my dad, which is kind of fucked up, but that's always how it is. And yeah.
I think there is something biological that definitely comes into play with certain things of attraction, but I feel like that's very multiversed. I mean, we're not bringing human design in here, but there's like a lot of different qualities where some people process to the whole like you complete me, the other side of me, where the descendant is something we can like use to distinguish this, because that might be playing out for this conversation. But it definitely depends on the individual of what is being fulfilling. Where just to reinforce it, I think that's where the descendant is coming in here, because it's how, I mean, I have a couple different philosophies, but it's like not only what we're looking at a partner, but it's also kind of like how we're meeting the outside world is what I kind of look at the descendant. Like what you're looking to actually kind of achieve out there in the world is something where the descendant is actually like being able to really get its grace. And when a planet is usually there's something awakening within the relationship formation. So it's like, if something's on the descendant, this gets in a lot of nitty gritty little details but it's really about like how our relationships are coming to us and how we're reflecting the other side of how we relate.
Yeah, I think the ascendant is how we meet the world, and the descendant is how others or the world meets us. Specifically, like others in intimate relationships. It doesn't just have to be your partner. It can be a family member, a close friend. I will see whenever the descendant or the seventh house is activated in a chart, sometimes the things that's going on during that time are actually changes or things happening to someone else in that person's life rather than the individual whose chart it came up in. And the ruler of the descendant, so for example, for me with a Pisces descendant or seventh house cusp, the traditional ruler is Jupiter. So if I want to understand more about the kind of partner I might end up with or the person that I really, really need, I'm going to look for Jupiter in the chart. Just like you would look at your ascendant ruler to understand yourself and your purpose, your biggest relationship planet isn't Venus. It's actually the ruler of your descendant. So my Jupiter in Libra is going to show a lot more about me needing a guy who has those kind of Libra qualities. Someone who embodies maybe some Pisces qualities and Libra qualities in their chart. And so if you look at that person's chart and they're just like, oh, Aries, that might not be your person. And it can show you a lot about what you need from someone.
To simply put it, if I may, is like I look at the descendant as kind of your sauce, and the descendant is almost looking at what kind of sauce you're looking for in the relationship. So I mean, I'll use myself, of course, but like I like let's start with Aries rising just for the first part, because I also believe Aries rising is collectively. Sometimes I look at the collective as starting as Aries rising in some opinions, but like obviously if you have someone that's like really engaged and physical and a little bit like calling shots and stuff, they're going to be wanting the descendant in Libra a little bit more of a feminine partner or a feminine partnership to kind of balance the lead, the kind of masculine dance lead to the feminine approach that's following. And so like that's just something that I think it needs to be in essence. So now as a Leo rising, for another example, is like I want to kind of be creative and dynamic in all these ways. But to be honest, I'm seeking a relationship that also helps me contact the world in a more worldly approach to approach different people versus it just being about myself. and the way I experience this is I look at the Ascendant as you, the actor, but I look at the Descendant as the stage. And who do you want to be on stage with is kind of in that play where there's a two to tango relationship, so to speak. So
I mean, I think the stage would be the midheaven, but the characters on stage with you would be the seventh house.
we could break all that down. It's just the way I'm looking at it is like my ruling planet is Saturn on the Descendant. And I look at like I'm meeting the world very Saturnian and wanting to be very Saturnian in my relationships and not consciously realizing desiring relationships that embody a kind of worldly essence that almost want to create structures and formations that take the Leo creativity into a much more Aquarian hindsight of universal connection with all people versus it just being about like performance. So what I guess I'm not necessarily saying the stage, because I guess we could have a discussion about the midheaven, but it's almost like the Descendant, in my opinion, is really kind of like what is the overtone that you're being met with into the collective, where the soul is meeting the outside world itself is where I see the Descendant playing out the most. If Mars is on my Descendant at a current moment, which might be coming up here, I'm really going to be coming off really Mars to the collective, almost more so. Because if I may, I look at the Ascendant and the Descendant as the most aspected areas in anyone's chart. If something's sitting on those two, it's getting like the most attention in the whole natal chart, personally.
Interesting. So let's talk about some examples. Like, what do you see in clients and friends and whoever you want to dish on without names?
I mean, obviously, when something's by the Ascendant, it's definitely powerful. But when it's on the Descendant, I think it even comes like even more so, again, to how they're reflecting with the relationships. I think even in relation to relationships, it is something louder than ever. So like whatever planet is kind of hanging out there, it's something that takes almost full precedence with you making friendships and having something of value to go there. So, if Venus is on the Descendant, you have someone that's really approaching relationships, very Venusian, very cooperative, very like soft in their approach to things. If like Jupiter's on the Descendant, they're like really like all like, opening up a vision and engaging that with the relationship. So there's all these examples. I use myself because I literally have Saturn right on my Descendant.
Ooh.
It's exact in Aquarius. And I will say, for having it in the 7th house, I'm grateful for this placement. But I realize how much it's helping me refine who I am, because it gets, in my opinion, full meters on every planet in my chart. But my lesson is not to just be Leo rising. I'm using this as a great example to like realize that how to refine that through Saturn and Aquarius and create a structure for all to find unification expression. So like, I might have kind of reiterated that to an extent, but like I look at that as like where the Descendant is actually how you're meeting the collective from within to coming out. The midheaven might be the spotlight, it might be the stage or that kind of your social sphere on how people are perceiving you in your way of expressing yourself. But I really just see that the Descendant is really like how you're reaching a relationship, how you're holding your hand out to relationships itself. Like,
So I have a question.
fire away.
So this book I'm reading is talking about how planets in the 7th or on the Descendant are projections. So we look for partners with those qualities because, like I was saying before, we maybe disown or don't fully embody those qualities. So like attracting partners who maybe are more serious, maybe are more critical, have a lot of like, I don't know, Saturnian qualities and traits. And I'm just curious if you feel like you identify with that and what you think about that.
For sure. I've had more Aquariuses in my life than any other sign that has been also have been difficult. I'm not trying to be biased here or anything, but like, yeah, it's been also like working through those kind of situations, and not just one or two, like over 6, over 8, like, the list is my business, but like that is just something that like really does come up to kind of learn and understand that perception of value also, and just how you're coming across. Let's use a Sag rising, for example. Like, Sag rising wants to be like creative and abundant and enthusiastic and optimistic, but they're going to need a partner very Gemini. They need someone to conversate. They need someone to bring ideas to the table. They need someone to intellectually talk about and go socialize and do other things. Sag rising needs that. So like they're going to be attracting people that are universally more social or mercurial in nature. I'm using myself as an example, but if it's not just Saturn characteristics, it's also been highly Uranian areas or expressions, basically, that have been brought in my forefront that I feel like your ascendant's now getting to play. Because if not, that opposition allows you to come into defining yourself. And I think that's as what people don't really understand, or they look at oppositions as, oh no, but I think it's really where you have to look at what are you defining yourself as, if it's becoming as a yin or yang situation. And I find that usually I've had Venus oppositions. I've experienced 3 or 4 of those that really have helped me define what my Venus and Sag really collaborates with an experience.
And what you definitely don't want moving forward.
Amen.
I'm just messing.
No, totally. But so like the Descendant, in my eyes, though, like it definitely should get way more appreciated. Like I it's not just. It will signify though divine partnerships. I will say, in like soulmate energy. Even soul contract, like business partners, people you want to connect with. But it's really like what's kind of completing that puzzle, because then it is out of balance, so to speak. So, this is a thing where I can't say indefinite, but even if, let's hypothetically say it's not anything major, it could come out as your partner's Mars or your partner's Venus. This can get even deep, but it could pop out as your children and how they express themselves and live vicariously through your children on some karmic wavelengths through your supposed spouse, because that energy of your descendant is wanting to be expressed out into the world. So like, Cancer risings, they might either have a Capricornic spouse, or their children are embracing Capricornic traits, or have, like, for example, the daughter having a Venus in Capricorn that's really well defined, or a Mars in Capricorn really well defined, almost bringing their relationship into their own children to embody that aspect through the descendant. So we're getting trippy in soul stuff. This is soul stuff.
Yeah, and that's why it's fun to look at family charts, because you'll see, oh, you guys all have this really strong like Uranus or Aquarius energy across all these charts. You see this kind of rebelliousness, and then there's maybe one kid who's like totally different, and you're like, what the? And that they feel different. Like maybe they'll have an Aquarius moon. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent. But I wanted to kind of talk about like a couple different things. First, I want to talk about what I find fascinating with transits to the Descendant, like planets moving over that 7th house cusp.
Right.
I just had a client with this who, him and his wife, they purchased a house when Uranus crossed his Descendant.
Oh, really?
And
interesting.
Sometimes that will lead to like, partners needing space, or, very freedom,
It's
like
pretty radical
Uranus kind of traits. But they bought a house in a different country. So I think
I see.
That is also kind of characteristic of Uranus. Or Saturn crossing the Descendant and people committing to a marriage, or even getting divorced. Because the thing about the 7th house is the Ascendant is where the sun is rising, or the constellation that's rising on the eastern horizon, and the Descendant is the setting place. So it's like where the sun essentially is setting, or where like the sign, I should say, that's setting.
Where Egyptian Ra is rising and a Set is setting, is where we're meeting the day and like almost taking our soul and meeting the other side.
And it reminds me, the 7th house reminds me a lot of the 4 of Wands in tarot. Like this energy.
Ooh, yeah.
And because being
Beautiful.
the completion point, being the setting point, it has a lot to do with like celebrations and things like coming full circle. So, for like weddings, like we're getting married and this is like completing a cycle of being single and entering a new cycle. Or, other endings, like relationship endings and so forth. So I think it's really interesting to watch transits go over this area and see kind of big life moments happen that are reflective of typically a relationship dynamic, or you with someone else, like Mars going over your descendant. You might find that you get into more fights than usual, or you might be like hyper sexual drive, like you just you
Taking
don't
more action, but there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of making moves.
involving other people. And so yeah, I just think it's the 7th house is such a strong house to see kind of really big things, really noticeable things kind of unfold in your life.
It's funny because I think I even know Libra risings, and they've even had like a debilitated Mars or something, but they have Mars in the 7th house. They want to call the shots. And that's a Libra rising, which is like, I don't want any issues for the most part, but like, Mars in by the descendant. And sometimes that can be difficult because you are a little bit like, you can come off kind of bossy, but you also know how to get things on board and get going. So, it really is. The 7th house is ruled by marriage and partnerships, classic cliche. But everything can be perceived as different because, there's an antithesis to each side of this, and not every sign is bad and not every sign's good. So like, and same goes with each planet. So, Uranus is one of the trippier ones for sure, because like anything could happen. If I can tell you anything about Uranus, expect the unexpected. What'll happen? I don't know. It's because it's almost like from a dimension you didn't even see coming. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that person. Holy crap, that opened up, or blankety blank blank blank. It's the one of the more difficult ones would be something like Neptune. Because Neptune on the descendant would create it like really dreamy, really beautiful, but there's some dualistic nature that happens with Neptune that like, it might be a wonderful time to illuminate the visions of relationships, illuminate the majesty and the dreams of relationships, but I almost feel like, but one of y'all is on welfare or something like that. I'm kidding. But like,
Are you though?
But yeah, Neptune on the descendant can create something where it's like, we're not looking at the full picture. We're not like seeing the whole realm. So all these got to be initiated. I think I just had Mercury on my descendant a little while ago, and there's some real conversations, soul conversations that if you don't connect with or talk about, they might be more impactful than the North Node. To some extent, because this is your soul. I need to experience this in this life, beyond even like the next part of life. This is like a scheduled appointment to like experience what this planet has to offer to the outside world, versus just if I had Mars on my ascendant, I'm getting a chance to shine internally. But on the descendant, I find you're actually really playing it out in the world.
I mean, I definitely think that planets on the ascendant give you a chance to play it out, but in a different way. It's more so like what's my purpose? What am I here to do? And when there's something with the descendant, it's always involving or impacting someone. So like, for example, I just had a client who had the South Node on her ascendant. So that means the North Node was on her descendant. And she might be watching this because she watches my videos. So hi. And she told me that she just met somebody recently. I'm not sure how recent, but I'm sure it was, around the timing of the North Node on her descendant, that she felt like was just this instant kind of soul connection. Like she knew that person was supposed to be in her life. Like she probably knew them from past lives.
Epic.
And so that North Node is coming to draw in people. And now that it was transiting her 7th, to draw in people that are here to help her on her path, teach her certain lessons, maybe a new relationship, like whatever that is. And so it's so fascinating to see how it's always about you and others in your life and how they can help facilitate more of the ascendant, which is about you finding your way through the world. Because we always need that mirror, that reflection, that opposite to help us understand ourselves, like you were saying earlier, and to help define our path. So yeah, I think it's super exciting to pay special attention to the descendant, planets crossing it, as well as especially like the descendant ruler, the planets that are aspecting it.
The descendant ruler is giving so much about what kind of, I would even argue maybe even more information about what's the partner you're looking for, understanding, or what you need actually because
Yeah.
of the planet's expression. Yeah.
And kind of like the natal promise for what you will likely experience, at least at some point. Maybe not the end result always, but what you will experience at some point. So, for example, I know somebody who has their descendant ruler in the seventh house making a square to Pluto. And he has had intense relationships in the past and some abusive relationships. And I'm like, you wouldn't just see that by like looking at his seventh house. I mean, maybe you could see that a little bit, but that connection with Pluto to understand like where the abuse is coming from is so important, and or manipulation or whatever power plays that Pluto brings in.
Right.
But you wouldn't understand that if you just looked at Venus, right? Because Venus is like right there on his descendant. It looks great. Oh, Venus in the seventh. Oh, you're so lucky with
It
relationships.
shows the journey that planet has to go through, or the ascendant.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you really kind of want to understand the lessons that you're attracting around these dynamics, the kinds of people, like the descendant ruler and its aspects can show you so much.
Very familiar with that aspect. Personally, yeah. It also gives an entire. It's the thing is though. I always look at squares get looked at is like the harsher elements, so they're not fun. But I also see that sometimes squares are the activators and they're the initiators. I actually find squares to be the most powerful aspect. And like I said, defining yourself, but also sometimes the square is like kind of like, I can't explain it. It's like the match that really got kicked off or something. And it really is the essence of change. I mean, we're here on the quarter square of the moon. And I feel like this is some of the bigger Pisces energies that are actually now shifting. And this is one of the most mutable vibes. But like without that, I will personally say, because I have that alignment, I have Pluto directly square the descendant. And I have definitely experienced forms of abuse, and especially in Scorpio, I've been emotionally manipulated and all the things. I look at that as my greatest gift. I fully own that. In fact, I'm so grateful for it. It's just like, it was definitely not, it's not an easy thing, but it's activating the gifts, in my opinion, of Saturn. So is it an easy journey? I don't think so. I'd definitely on a soul level, it could be hell interpretively. But like the rebirth that the antithesis of the rebirth that Pluto brings is something I highly identify with and deeply have fallen in love with upon said journey. But I will say that is making up who I am. That will probably define in the relationships I attract and desire to move forward. So we have to look at the whole chart in itself to find validity and clarity on what can be understood from a partner. Like this is why you can drop a reading from either me or Willow here. But to look at the descendant, it's a great conversation to open up, because like this is what we're seeking out there. This is how we're being looking to be met, even in a soul way of like my soul sees something new, the yin to the yang, so to speak, in many different versions. But it gets more complicated than that. And, you know, it's just something to recognize and look at, but see what is it that we're really looking for in a partnership. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that we're just playing out a lot of our life's karma and trying to really understand ourselves through others and through that mirror. And I think really closely examining your descendant planets in the seventh house, the ruler of your descendants and its aspects, can show you a lot about what you've come here to fully integrate and understand about yourself in this lifetime. Because again, all this is stuff that you do have innately within you. It's just not expressed to its fullest extent, not owned to its fullest extent. And so you might attract people who trigger you because they have those traits and you want to express them, but there's something stopping you. And so it's so useful to have relationships in our life to help bring those parts of ourselves to life.
Amen.
Should we wrap up there? Is there anything that you wanted to say?
You know, we could talk for hours on this situation, but like I love the topic. I kind of want to make a part 2 or something of this, but like as far as relationships and talking about this, awesome topic. Probably didn't even scratch the surface, to be honest, but I think that's good. I think that's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for staying tuned. Don't
Thank y'all.
forget to check us out in the description box below.
Boom.
We'll have our links there. And if you want to book a reading, you know where to find us.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.